Hi everybody, welcome to my session. I'm going to talk about what I call the Western view on Asian market changes and dynamics. And I'm going to, I have one slide which is going to introduce myself a little bit more detail. And I'm not doing this because I'm a very egocentric guy or something like that. I'm just trying to give you a little bit of context why a, biz dev guy from Crytek is talking about dynamics of Asia from a Western point of view. It's more, this slide is supposed to be more from my personal background and my career background rather than representing what Crytek does. So I'll give you a quick introduction of who I am. So I'm actually half Korean, half German. My mother is Korean, my father is German. I grew up in Korea, but went to German international school. So I was extremely lucky to be able from when I was young to understand both cultures, more from the Western point of view as well as from the Asian point of view. I started my gaming career in 2001, and since then I started that in Korea, but half of my career is out of Asia, the other half is out of Europe. So also from my career progression point of view, I have a bit of an insight between the two continents, basically. Right now, I'm responsible for business development at Crytek, but I have been doing a lot of different things throughout my career, which were all around pretty much games as a service, online games, international business development, and whatnot. So let's get started. So if you talk about the Asian game market, we talk a lot about, as it would be one market, but in fact, what we're talking about mostly is China, as we have heard in the previous session, or Korea, specifically South Korea, not the north part, and Japan. Sometimes we include also Taiwan, Southeast Asia, and other territories, but these are individual territories which have had their own histories as well as own different business topics and whatnot. So what I'm going to do is go through the histories a little bit of these markets to have a little bit of a better understanding of what's going on and why these markets are different compared to the Western market, and also different to each other. I have a couple of chapters. So the first chapter, we're going to look at the console market history in Asia. Now, I guess this is the most familiar one to you guys because, in the early days, 80s and 90s, Japan was actually the leading console devices manufacturer. And to some extent, they still are. But back then, it was not only the companies which we know, like Nintendo or Sega, who were doing this. There were other companies out of Japan, like NEC, with their PC engine, or TurboGrafx 16, as it was known in other territories, or the SNK group with their Neo Geo releases. So there was a lot of, early on, getting into the gaming, getting into the console gaming part happening in Japan. Not only the home consoles, but also, as they are still now. I mean, it's pretty much, you only have really successful handheld consoles coming out of Japan, if you think about it. But it wasn't only just Nintendo and Sony as these days, but also Sega had their Game Gears. I don't know if anybody remembers these. Even NEC had their handheld console. SNK Neo Geo Pocket, I don't know if anybody recognizes this, but a lot of entertainment and console and devices were coming out of Japan in the 80s and 90s. What were other Asian markets doing back in the time? Well, actually, I happened to live in Korea back then. So what happened in Korea was, due to political issues, Japanese products were not supposed to be released in Korea directly. So actually, big Korean conglomerates like Hyundai, as in the car company, have released Nintendo products. So it was called, I don't know if you see the circles, but Hyundai had the Hyundai Convoy, which was the NES. I actually didn't have a Convoy, but I had a Hyundai Mini Convoy, which was the Game Boy, essentially. And Samsung had partnered with Sega, and I think they were called the Samsung Aladdin Boys for some reason. I think they had their PC line, which were called Aladdins, so they called their consoles, which they licensed from Sega, Aladdin Boy, which is an interesting historical fact. Now, that was happening in Korea. China, Taiwan was more focused just looking at the console market point of view, they had created these clone NES markets. So, not necessarily just in these regions, but a lot of the, some of the clones went out to international territory. So Taiwan made NES clones, made it to Russia and Eastern European territories and stuff like that. So you can clearly see, if you think of console gaming in Asia, it was really just Japan leading the market, where the other territories were pretty much just following what Japan was doing. And this continued, and to some extent it still continues today. So globalization happened, a lot of the smaller players had to die down, the bigger players were taking on, such as Sony, Nintendo. They're still one of the major console providers today, and unfortunately, platforms like Sega Dreamcast had to die down later on, but still, if you think from a globalization point of view, Japan is still a very important player in the console market space. Let's get to another sector, the online market history. So in the online market in the early days, so late 90s to 2000s, it was actually South Korea who was leading the market, if you look at it from a historical point of view. And as early as 1996, when Nexon first released, the translation would be Legend of the Winds. And it's still debated today if that was actually the first MMO to ever be released versus Ultima Online. And in my knowledge, Ultima Online was released in '97, so I would say Korea was leading on that. Then you had follow-on successes such as Lineage from NCSoft, Ecto's remade made Legend of Mir series, which was actually more successful in China, which we'll be talking about a little bit. Websen, probably you've heard of as well internationally, started off in Korea with Mu Online in 2001, one of the first 3D MMOs. And then also Gravity with Ragnarok Online, which was also installed in many global locations. And that was a trend which was following up not just domestically from Korea, but these sort of Asian-style MMOs or K-MMOs have started to get licensed to international territories. Firstly, in more nearby markets within Asia, such as Shanda took on Legend of Mir, and that was pretty much how Shanda also became big at the early stages with the success of Legend of Mir, which was a Korean product. But also, Japan was also a major licensed territory. Taiwan, Germania, licensing Lineage was a huge success for them. And if you remember back in the day, Ragnarok Online was, as far as I remember, one of the first MMOs to be available everywhere in the world, licensed to many early on publishing companies. At some stage, they had 66 countries servicing Ragnarok Online. So, really the license model, internationalization of online games happened back then. Korea was not only just making these, they were also quite innovative in terms of coming up with new business models and business ideas. So as early as 1999, it wasn't a game, but a sort of a social avatar-based chatting service called Say Club from the company NeoWiz, which now is more recognized as a game company. They were the first ones to start the sort of the free-to-play business model in the regards of the first ones selling virtual goods. So, but back then it seemed like a crazy idea. So the chatting service was for free, and then you were buying clothes and stuff like that for your avatars. But it was fairly successful. And then it was actually Nexon with their casual title lineups, the first one being Quiz, a title which was released in 1999, but they adopted the free-to-play or the virtual item selling model to their game and made it very, very successful. So a lot of casual online games coming out of the market adopted the free-to-play business model, because back then it was really hard to monetize on casual non-MMO titles. But soon after, even MMO titles, such as Joyon's Great Merchant in 2002, it's a company I worked for back then, have adopted the free-to-play business model also for MMO titles, RPG titles, and put more emphasis on economy and that sort of stuff. So that really created the market, really. There were also a lot of different types of attempts, like Nexon always being very innovative and really leading in terms of trying out different business models and whatnot. In 2004, they released a title called Mabinogi, a MMORPG, where they had sort of like a hybrid free-to-play model where you had 2 hours which you can play per day, but you had to have sort of a micro subscription to keep playing and stuff like that, which in the end didn't work out really well, but there was a lot of trial and error of business models happening in that region, which we now know globally exist. And of course, we just had a talk before me about the Chinese market, but also the rise of the China market as an important marketplace for gaming, but specifically for online gaming, was happening in that time in the mid-2000s. Firstly with Shanda releasing Legend of Mir, but also it wasn't just Korean titles. I mean, you had titles like World of Warcraft entering the Chinese market, now being published by NetEase, but also we talked about Tencent's Crossfire, a Korean FPS title licensed in 2008, which is currently, according to Superdata Research, one of the top 10 or top 5 even online games, or games in general in terms of revenue, because they're making $1 billion every year basically with this game. So China became a really interesting marketplace for a lot of online game developers around the world to be entering the Chinese market. Okay, and then let's talk a little bit about the mobile market history, a little bit more recent trends. If you talk about mobile in terms of the Asian market point of view, we cannot ignore, of course, the Japanese market again. Japan started on really early, so it was even before the iPhone arrived, before the true smartphone devices arrived, when every other territory, when every other consumer was consuming stuff on their PCs, for some reason Japanese people didn't like to consume internet or gaming on PCs, and they were spending a lot of time on mobile devices, on dumb phones basically. So a lot of these social network companies coming out of Japan have created social networks which were friendly with mobile devices. So these are Gree, DNA with their Mobagi platform, Mixi, who have started to put games connected to their social networks, which were really focused on mobile-first approaches. So as early as 2007, Gree with their Fishing Star and a lot of other titles entered the market before actually iPhone and Android was taking on. Now, obviously, you have Puzzle and Dragon from Gung Ho, which was released in 2012, as well as Monster Strike from Mixi, which is currently competing for #1 top-grossing market position in Japan constantly against Puzzle and Dragon. So Japan is a really big market, but it also has a relatively longer history than any other mobile market from a mainstream point of view, which is an interesting fact you should consider. Then, of course, after the 2010s, so specifically 2012, the rise of sort of the messenger-type mobile games took on. And again, this was a trend which was starting out of South Korea. So in South Korea, nobody uses WhatsApp, everybody uses KakaoTalk for messaging. My mom uses it, my dad uses it. Whenever I'm talking to my Korean friends back in Korea, I have to use KakaoTalk, right? So it's sort of a very mainstream thing. And this company have started to put games on their platform, connecting the user base of KakaoTalk users to games. And early on successes like Anypang from a company called Sunday Toast, which, by the way, had an IPO in the Korean Stock Exchange last year due to this game success. Really strong market boom happened because it was a very social environment, a very mainstream approach. And this trend followed to other territories within Asia. So in Japan, it was actually Line, which was the leading messaging app. So they took that approach as well, on top of the other social networks which were doing that. In China, Tencent's WeChat platform had a very similar approach of connecting games to their WeChat platform, which is the equivalent dominating messaging app in the Chinese market. So each of these markets have different strong players in terms of who are the messaging apps, and thus also the platforms are relatively different if you look at the mobile landscape. Having a little bit deeper look into this, this is charts as of 2 days ago from App Annie. So if you look at the top matrix, this is from iOS, but it will be similar if you look at Android as well. One interesting thing is if you look at the red box, which I highlighted in the top grossing ranks, and you look at pretty much most of the markets, it's pretty similar, top grossing apps. You have your Clash of Clans, you have Candy Crush, you have Game of War or Boom Beach, pretty much in all of these markets, except if you look closely to Japan, China, and South Korea. Nevertheless, Korea has Clash of Clans, but in most of these territories, the top charts look very, very different. Having a little bit more closer look into this, of course, there's a lot of alien language which most people can't read, but it's actually, if you look closer, it's different alien languages. And if you can see anything, the company names in the Chinese top 10 grossing apps, you see a lot of Shenzhen, Tencent Computer Entertainment, Shenzhen, Tencent Technology, blah, blah, blah. So there's a lot of dominance from like Tencent. In Japan, you see from company point of view, you have Gongho Online, you have Mixi, you have Line, you have Kolopo, you have Line again, and so on. So it's a very different scheme. Same as in Korea, different companies, except for Clash of Clans in the top, which is not visible in any other Asian market, in the big ones. But you see a lot of in the game names, for Kakao. So these are the games which are tied to the Kakao platform. So you can see very different market schemes within the Asian market. So you can't really say Asia is one market. Each of these markets are very different, and they also have a very different sort of emphasis on what is strong and what is not strong and whatnot. So as a final conclusion, I have slides for each of these countries. Starting off with Korea, 5 key differences. So in Korea, the quality of service is most important thing. Most important aspect, because it's a very saturated market. There's a lot of content creation happening in that market, which also means competition is really high. If your game, be it an online game or a mobile game, does not have the right service, the servers are breaking down or it's hard to access, players have other games to play. There's so many games out there, so they're not really forgiving if your service is bad. So that's a very important key aspect for the Korean market specifically. It's a very hardcore user base on the core gameplay. A lot of the top esports players are coming from this country. But it's not only specific players, actually the whole nation is a little bit hardcore. So the mainstream of the Korean audience would be a little bit more hardcore compared to other markets, which is an important factor to think of. Localization does definitely matter, so localize it well, because if it's done wrong, it can go really bad as well. So you try to find a good partner who can localize your content. Regarding monetization, be smart about it. A new trend of monetization happens in this country, and the hardcore mainstream user base know about the recent trend. So if you go there with a pretty old monetization scheme, they will notice it will be hard to monetize these users. If you do manage to monetize Korean users, it's a very high monetizing country, but you have to be smart about it. Graphic style for developing to that market, it's a little bit more realistic than the preference are a little bit more realistic looking characters compared to, let's say, Japan, where it's more anime-like. But the term realistic can be sometimes misleading because they have to kind of look very, very pretty. So your character needs to be really pretty. So if you are, thinking about releasing a game in Korea, look at, benchmark a lot of, I don't know, K-pop bands and stuff like that, how they look, and they pretty much want to look like that in their gaming worlds. Japan. I would say Japan is the territory where, as a priority of the game, the element of fun is most important compared to other territories. However, the definition of fun for a Japanese user can be very different from other territories. So be careful, what you're building here. It's a very high, extremely high retention and engagement country. So I would say it's a very different type of hardcore users. So I would call them a metagame hardcore audience. And in terms of localization, if you're thinking about localizing your existing game, it's going to be really hard to have mainstream appeal in the Japanese market. If it still looks like a Western game which is localized to Japan, it needs to look like a Japanese game. It needs to have graphics which are Japanese and whatnot. So, if you want to be really mainstream successful in Japan, make it, even if it's not made in Japan, make it look like made in Japan. Monetization-wise, super high monetizing country, gacha mechanisms, any pachinko-like mechanisms work really, really well. So, focus on that sort of elements. And of course, as I said, graphics, there's no way around it. It needs to be anime style. Lastly, China. Actually, what is most important here, rather, is actually the feeling of reward, whatever you do in the game, which is kind of strange, but that's how it is. There's, of course, lots and lots of, it's a really big market, there's lots of users, but actually it's getting more and more difficult to retain the user base, even if there's a big pool of users. So you have to have a lot of good partnerships with, cross-game stuff and stuff like that to be successful in that market. Localization is very important, both culturally and politically. Don't have killing panda mechanisms or anything like that in your game. It just doesn't work. You will get banned. So it's a matter of getting banned or not being released or getting banned. So localization is, of course, a key. Monetization, the reason why China monetization is working really well is because they see payers as VIPs. And they see different tiers in VIPs. So, pay to win is sort of okay in the way because they treat payers good. Keep this in mind. Keep this in mind to think of, how to make the game change if a non-payer becomes a payer, because you have to treat that player pretty well. Graphics are less of a priority compared to other markets, but it's getting there slowly. So as a final conclusion, all these markets, there's no one Asia market. Korea, China, Japan are all different individual markets. Each of the Asian markets have developed in different histories, as you've seen. So if you know a little bit about these histories, you will hopefully understand a little bit of why these things, why the differences are coming, where the differences are coming from and whatnot. A lot of Asian trends happened earlier and then have translated into the West, such as the free-to-play phenomenon and whatnot. So actually keeping an eye on what's happening in Asia will help also in many cases what will happen to predict a little bit of the future in the global marketplace as well. And one prediction I see is there will be more and more Western games trying to enter the Asian market, and that will happen, but also the other way around, that Asian content will come both on mobile and online and any type of game times, that there will be more cross-cultural game releases happening. And that's it for my presentation. Thank you.
Great job, Pa. Very informative, very informative. A lot of information there. So let's open it up to questions. We've got some time. Right here? Mike is coming.
Hi. In China, consoles have been banned for 14 years. They just opened up, but China has already decided that they don't like consoles. But they're very, very excited about the Android TV boxes, right? About 60 million of them already in China right now. Is this something you guys look at, and do you think these TV boxes will start making it to the West as well?
That's a great question. I think the buzz around micro console is really big, and this is mainly coming from a lot of big companies. There's not one key player, I would say. There's a lot of the big guys are having their individual consoles tied to businesses where they bundle it together with like a cable TV subscription or whatever. So I think a lot of the push will come from the companies, Chinese companies, to push, because they see it as a new channel for them to release their games. When mobile was rising, for companies like Tencent, there was a whole new channel for them to push new game content out there. Similarly, I think the companies see micro consoles as a new channel because that hasn't existed before. So in terms of, it's a new market approach, I could definitely see that could be something appealing for the Chinese market. However, there hasn't been any history of games being played in the living rooms like in the Western market. So me personally, I'm a little bit half-half about if it's going to be successful or not in the China market in the mainstream appeal point of view. We'll have to see. Is it going to come to the West? We'll have to see. The point is, I think it's not even coming to the other Asian markets, right? Like I don't see any trend like micro consoles happening in Korea or Japan. So it's not really a pan-Asian thing which is happening. So I think it will take some time, and it's the first time actually truly where China is leading on a new market. So it's going to be interesting. But so we at Crytek, we're looking very carefully at this phenomenon. Hopefully, it's a vague answer, but hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah. So basically, you're keeping an eye on it, but you haven't decided whether to develop games for it or not. Or
Yes, that would sum it up.
What other questions do we have? Lena?
So in terms of the movement between East and West, free-to-play was an early trend in Asia. What are your predictions for some trends that are coming over to Europe that you're seeing in Asia, either today or in the very recent past?
I think so. I don't think one of the trends which is missing, especially in the mobile space, I think is sort of the messenger-type platform ecosystem and whatnot. And I don't think companies like WhatsApp or Telegram or these kind of guys are really interested to open up like game connectivity or something like that. But I could definitely see more movement. Be it WeChat and Line trying to enter more the market, but also like the general platform approaches where that there is a bigger player in the mobile space where for developers it's easier to connect for social connectivity. Also because one of the outcomes was with the rise of KakaoTalk or Line was people suddenly didn't need to invest a lot of CPI costs in those markets. So definitely there's a niche there, especially because we're talking a lot about CPI costs are rising so high and whatnot. Solving this issue, not in the same way as Asia did it, but some of the learnings which can be seen there might come over to the West as well, is one of the trends I would see coming.
Thank you.
What other questions do we have? We've got time for one more. Okay, we're all good? Thank you, Paha. We appreciate it. Very good.